Chapter 5 is going to be about populations, so how the populations grow, various effects and limits to growth on populations, and then finally we're going to look at the human populations. The very first thing we should do is we should review what a population is. And a population is just a group of similar organisms that can breed and produce fertile offspring. One of the keywords here is fertile offspring. For example, a lion and a tiger, they can reproduce and make a liger. However, that offspring that they produce is not fertile and it cannot create its own babies. So therefore, a lion and tiger are in different populations because they cannot produce fertile offspring. Let's take a look at some pictures here and try and figure out how many populations that we have. Our first example right here, we have the Canadian geese. If we're talking about just about animals, we have one population of animals with 3 individual organisms. However, we do have grass there too, and if all of those grasses were the same species that we have there, we'd have 2 populations. But let's focus on just the animals for these pictures. This right, or flowers too. Here's the flowers. We have one population of flowers. I see no other organisms there, species. Here we have several organisms. We have the sea anemones, which are in the background right there. We have some different populations of coral here too. I see a fish right there. I can't exactly tell you how many populations there are, but there's quite a few. This picture right here, I see all the fish. All the fish look incredibly similar. I'm assuming that they are all in the same exact population, so we have one population. Here, in this Savannah scene, I see some animals that are in the water right there. Deer-like animals, not sure exactly what they are, and elephants in the background right there. So I'm seeing 2 populations of animals. There might be more that I cannot see, but 2 populations. And then right here, 1 population of wolves. So what affects populations? So populations often change due to a variety of influential factors, and there's 3 main influential characteristics. The very first one is going to be geographic distribution, and geographic distribution is just the range of an area inhabited by a population. So for example, here on the right hand side we have the chimpanzee, and the chimpanzee lives primarily in Central Africa. There are several factors that affect why the chimpanzee lives just in this area. There's limiting factors that do not allow the chimpanzee to live further south. Might be because of temperature, who knows. And there's also limiting factors that do not allow the chimpanzee to live north of this area, and that might be because of temperature, again, too high, or maybe a lack of food, lack of water in those different areas. Something about this area has very favorable characteristics that allow a chimpanzee to live there. And this is the geographic distribution. It's basically the range of where a population lives. Now humans, on the other hand, have done a great job of basically occupying every square inch of the world, and they have a very wide geographic distribution. We could also look at the population density, and that is just the number of individuals per unit area. And looking at this picture right here, blue indicates very high population density. However, the white and the lighter shades of yellow are very low population density. And you can see here that the east coast of the United States of America has an incredibly high population density, especially here on the eastern seaboard. This is where you have New York City, you have Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, and New Jersey is very crowded right there too. That's a state, obviously, but very, very, very crowded there. Florida, all around the coast has very high population density. It's very dark there. However, we have this little patch here in the middle that is a lighter population density. The reason that is because this area right here is the Florida Everglades, and the Florida Everglades and a big lake is right down there too. The Everglades are just a wet area where not many people live, and therefore there's a very low population density because it's not very inhabitable for humans, and there's also a very big national park down there too. So, and you can see that the western part of the Midwest, and then also the mountain states right here have very low population density outside of a few places. This is Denver, Colorado. This right here is Santa Fe, New Mexico. So there's high population density in the big cities, but for the most part, there's not a whole lot of people that live west of the Mississippi, which is going to be right about here. And there's some small pockets. However, California, West Coast, Oregon, Washington has very high population density on the coast. And population density is just a number of individuals per any kind of unit that you can specify. And the population density can vary tremendously depending on the species and ecosystem. On the left-hand side, we have a very high population of those sunflowers right there. There's many. However, on the right-hand side, in the desert, has the saguaro cactus has a very low population density. There's very few individuals per a square mile, square kilometer, square meter, whatever unit you want to use. But they have a very low population density. Here's some more examples. Flock of birds, high population density. If we talked about just this log right here, we see that we have a very high population density of turtles on it. They're occupying many of the square centimeters on there. So, what are some benefits of living close together in a very clumped population? One of them is you have help finding food. You have several sets of eyes that can look out and they can scan and look for food. You also have protection from predators or wind. Salmon use this a lot. Salmon often move in schools. What this does is it does not single out any single salmon. And the predator can only get one of the salmon from the school, and the rest of the salmon can escape without any problem. If you just had one salmon swimming in the ocean and you had one predator, that predator can easily single out that one salmon and kill that one salmon. However, if you travel in a large group and there's one predator trying to get to their meal, they're going to take one salmon from the group, and the rest of the school can survive. Also, you have protection from wind, and deer do this a lot too. They clump up together, and penguins do it a lot also. They clump up together and they stay warm, and only the individuals on the outside there are going to be exposed to the wind, while the individuals on the inside are going to stay nice and warm. And what they do is they cycle in and out. So some of them move to the outside, and then the others that were on the outside move to the middle in order to stay warm. So what are some drawbacks of living in a clumped population? First of all, you have very crowded living areas. No one likes living in crowded living areas. No one likes living in a crowded house. People and other organisms, they do like having their own space. You also have battles in these crowded living areas. They lead to battles over food and shelter. There's only so much food that's going to be in an environment. And when you have very crowded areas, it's very difficult to get that food. And then finally, it's much easier for disease to spread. You see this in any area of very high population density, regardless of the organism. So if it's a human, you see this for the flu outbreaks and any kind of disease or viral outbreak, it's going to spread a lot faster in a very high population density area. You also see this in like feedlots for cattle, where you have 30,000 cattle living in a very small area. If one disease gets into those cattle, it's going to spread through that whole population incredibly fast, and it's not a good thing. So population density drawback, another one would be it's easier for disease to spread. The growth rate is just the amount by which a population size changes in a given time. Here's a map of the world, and if we look at the colors here, if it's red, that means the population is increasing, and the darker it is, the faster that population is increasing. However, if you look at areas that are white, this is where the population is actually decreasing, and there's no variance in that. It just is decreasing on this chart right here. Areas that have very high population growth is Africa. Africa has very high population growth. Central America, parts of the Middle East right there too. And then right up here in Mongolia, you do have some high population growth. Most of Europe, actually Russia, not most of Europe, but Russia right there, and other countries that are in Eastern Europe over here, they are either decreasing or they have a very stable population.